Good morning, everybody. Most of you, I'm sure, have seen the Innocence Files, which the the first episode is called, of course, Indeed and Without Date, which was the famous saying by in court of Michael West, trying to convince the jury that there's no doubt about this. It is indeed and without doubt a match. Bite marks. And I was reminded the other day that in dozens of cases of Michael West's, Richard Sauvignon actually comes along and says, "Well, hold on a sec. You know, you only got one set of teeth. If you've got bite marks, you must have two bite marks. Because you have to bite with both both your upper and lower teeth. It's absolutely ridiculous." And of course, in the episode one in particular, we see Chris Fabricant really looking at the junk science. They go to a convention, don't they, where they look at the different people who are trying to promote their new techniques. Quite worrisome, but of course it's big business. Stephen Haynes and Dr. Stephen Haynes and Michael West made huge amounts of money by doing their various work, if you like, trying to convict innocent people for the benefit of the various law enforcement agencies. They actually advertised in a police journal, to boasting about their conviction rate. If you want somebody convicted, we're the experts to do it. I mean, seriously, bizarre. And as we know, Michael West never once solved a case where he actually came up with a suspect. It was always the police had a suspect and he would make that suspect fit. So anyway, let's move on to this article, which was actually posted by Chris Fabricant himself. As you know, a lot of us are keen dog lovers, so this should appeal to us greatly. Except, unfortunately, you can't put a dog on a witness stand and cross-examine it. So it does create a bit of a problem. Let me see if I can get this article up for us to have a look at. So this is an article that also a very similar one appeared in Science magazine. However, the sniff test, courtroom testimony about dogs detecting dead bodies, keeps sending people to prison even without physical evidence. Critics say the science is lacking. And I don't think that means that the dogs themselves are lacking. It's the science behind it. As it says here, a version of this story appeared in Science, volume 374, issue number 6565. Mark Redwine kept mementos of his youngest son in the cab of his truck. The boy's name, Dylan, is tattooed on his left shoulder. He distributed missing person posters at truck stops. In November 2012, his 13-year-old son had arrived to spend Thanksgiving at Redwine's cabin near the San Juan National Forest in southwestern Colorado. Redwine told an FBI investigator that he left Dylan asleep on the couch when he went to town. When he returned, the boy was gone. More than 6 months later, hikers found skeletal remains on a trail high in the desert, clear air, about 16 kilometers from Redwine's cabin. It's about 10 miles. Authorities confirmed the bones belonged to Dylan, but the local coroner could not determine cause of death. To go missing is not a crime, but Redwine's ex-wife, Elaine Hall, and the couple's oldest son came to suspect Redwine did something to make Dylan disappear. Redwine flatly denied any involvement, but police soon honed in on him. On 5th August 2013, the investigation took a dramatic turn when Karen Corcoran arrived in Durango, Colorado, with her German Shepherd, Molly. At the time, this is interesting, Corcoran worked for the Madison, Wisconsin Police Department. In her off hours, she ran Canine Search Solutions, a private firm that specialized in using dogs trained to sniff out cadavers to search for missing people. By her count, she had worked 265 cases in 30-odd years. Molly, or Bitty, as Corcoran called the dog, was unusually small for her breed. Molly had started out as a timid little puppy that was given up to a rescue. Corcoran later wrote, but under her tutelage, the dog became, quote, a legend in the field of human remains detection. Corcoran and Molly met local police at a La Plata County Sheriff's Office warehouse. All right, at a La Plata County Sheriff's Office warehouse known as Area 51. Inside, Corcoran let Molly off the leash. Go find, she said. Nose down, Molly sniffed at the concrete floor. Corcoran understood the dog's behavior to mean the area was all clear, free of odors. Then she asked investigators to bring in the evidence. 3 paper packages containing clothes marked Redwine had allegedly worn at the time of Dylan's disappearance. Corcoran again commanded Molly to search. This time, her dog went up to the bags, gave a deep, audible sniff, looked Corcoran in the eye, and sat down next to 2 of them. Because Corcoran had trained Molly to sit when the dog detected the odor of human remains, those indications suggested the odor of a dead body lingered on jeans, a pair of sneakers, and a work shirt. Next, the team went to Redwine's cabin, which was unoccupied. Molly sat down in a nearby stream and indicated at 5 other locations outside the home, according to Corcoran. Then she saw her dog looking up at a window. An investigator climbed into the house and opened the door for Corcoran and Molly. Inside, the dog made its indication, a sit near a wood stove, in a bedroom on a brown sofa, by a washing machine, and elsewhere. In February 2014, police called Corcoran back and had Molly sniff Redwine's Dodge pickup truck. Again, Corcoran said her dog detected the odor of human remains more than a year after the boy's disappearance. It's not enough to say I have this amazing expert. You have to explain exactly what their method is. Nearly 4 years later, Redwine, driving a semi-trailer, pulled into a parking lot in Bellingham, Washington. Police officers approached and arrested him on suspicion of killing his youngest son. In a body camera video of the encounter released to a local TV station, Redwine looks disheveled and confused. If you guys can you please explain to me what's going on? State prosecutors in Colorado persuaded a grand jury to indict Redwine on some of the most serious charges the state could pursue: child abuse and second-degree murder. His trial began in July, and the prosecution's narrative was built in no small part on commonly held assumptions about the behavior of a scent-detecting dog. Of course, dogs have been celebrated since antiquity for their ability to sniff a particular odor and lead humans to its source. But the domesticated canine's transformation into crime-fighting companion emerged much more recently, as US police launched canine training programs and a thriving cottage industry of private firms, which often aid law enforcement, emerged. Today, police use dogs to track fugitives and search for missing persons, obtain probable cause, that is, legal justification to get a search warrant, and find substances. particularly illegal drugs. In what are known as scent lineups, agencies use trained canines to match evidence collected at a crime scene to the scent of a suspect or body. Increasingly, testimony from dog handlers has also served as direct evidence of guilt, accepted in lieu of an actual corpse, drug stash, or other physical evidence of a crime. That is worrying. Testimony from dog handlers has served as direct evidence of guilt. Yet, critics worry that the criminal legal system has, I like that. I like the fact that he used the word legal system and not justice. You know I do. Has embraced a technique profoundly lacking in scientific validation. Dog sniff evidence has led to wrongful convictions, and studies show human biases skew animal behavior. Almost no published research indicates just what dogs detect or how they do it. Defendants and their lawyers can't cross-examine a dog, which means the accused cannot scrutinize the evidence or readily confront their accusers, a right enshrined in the US Constitution. I think I need to share this with a certain gorilla, Magilla, see what he thinks about this. I'm sure this would be quite interesting. As we read that quote earlier, it's not enough to say I have this amazing expert with an incredible nose who can distinguish between scents, says Benjamin Bloom, an evidence scholar at the University of California, Hastings College of Law, who contends such testimony short circuits the safeguards in place to discriminate between junk science and real science. You have to explain exactly what their method is. Okay. In 1990, about the time Corcoran joined the police force in Madison, she read a book, So That Others May Live, Caroline Hebard and Her Search and Rescue Dogs, describing one woman's passion for finding missing people. She was intrigued, but her bosses were not initially interested in deploying canines, so Corcoran began to train German Shepherds on her own time. Between 1999 and 2001, she went to 5 seminars hosted by Canine Solutions Incorporated and taught by Sandra Anderson, a trainer with an uncanny knack for turning up evidence where others found nothing. Oh dear. Sometimes no evidence existed. The FBI accused Anderson of planting bones and other remains for her dog to find, and she went to prison. Wow, in 2004. In 2005, Corcoran founded Canine Search Solutions. Almost the exact same name, isn't it? Attracting volunteers who shared a love for dogs, the outdoors, and in the words of one colleague, solving mysteries and bringing closure to families. Corcoran's biggest break came in 2004 when she cracked a cold case. A Wisconsin woman had gone missing in 1976. Nearly 4 decades later, Corcoran's dog at the time, Cleo, indicated in 40 locations where the woman's ex-husband, the chief suspect, allegedly killed her and then tried to hide the body. No remains were found, and a judge barred Corcoran from testifying in the trial. Nonetheless, police said the suspect confessed and admitting to dumping the body at the locations Cleo flagged. So soon, other prosecutors were asking Corcoran to testify in trials. In court transcripts, she described dogs as terrible poker players, incapable of deceit. As for Molly, she told one court last year, I would put my house up against her indications. Well, at least we get to see a picture of Molly, who looks a very, very fine Alsatian. And here we have Karen Corcoran Gummin's testimony about the indications provided by her German Shepherd Molly helped convict Mark Redwine of murder this summer. Her career arc mirrors a broader shift in the United States. The number of police dogs swelled from 2,000 in 1989 to as many as 50,000 in 2010 after the 2013 Supreme Court ruling in Florida versus Harris, which found drug detection dogs reliable as long as the dog and handler team was properly trained and certified. Judges increasingly allowed expert witnesses to testify about dog sniffing evidence. As with the 2005 cold case, the charges against Redwine hinged on Molly's ability to detect the odor of dead bodies where no human remains could be found. The best way I can describe it is someone pops popcorn in your house, Corcoran explained to one Wisconsin jury. You come in, you can smell the popcorn that's been popped, but there is no popcorn left. Suspects could hide a body, but as she saw it, no one could outrun a dog's nose. The notion has plausible roots. Behind a dog's leathery, wet nose, and I can certainly testify to that, having been woken up by one for the last 6 months at stupid o'clock in the morning, lies a cavernous labyrinth of scroll-shaped chambers called ethmoturbinates, lined with some 200 million olfactory receptors, encoded by an estimated 2.5 times as many genes as in humans. In recent years, researchers studying canine cognition have shown pet dogs can sniff out minute quantities of odorants, such as the odor of their owner's t-shirt after it has been worn. In the best-known study on what is sometimes called residual odor, one that Corcoran has cited in court, German researchers placed carpet squares underneath two recently deceased corpses and then presented those squares to 3 trained Malinos. The 2007 study showed the dogs accurately distinguished those squares from negative controls, though critics contend the findings were muddled by possible contamination and poor experimental design. But what odors would be left 7 months or more after Dylan's alleged murder? Although forensic anthropologists have identified hundreds of compounds associated with cadavers, little evidence suggests all dead bodies immediately start to give off a standard, identifiable odor signature. John McGann, a neuroscientist at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, who wrote an influential review paper in Science arguing that poor human olfaction is a myth, says even in cases where you say, okay, a dog can follow a scent trail through the woods and find a person. Yes, they can. But what are they smelling? We don't know, right? We just literally don't really know what exactly they're smelling. So you can't ask the dog. Well, you can ask him or her, but you might not always get an answer. In the decade leading up to Mark Redwine's trial, Corcoran had amassed an impeccable track record. Prosecutors had called her to testify in 6 criminal cases. Each time, judges allowed her testimony to be introduced before a jury. The suspects were found guilty, and unexplained deaths became criminally punishable homicides. On 27th of June 2019, almost 7 years after Dylan disappeared, Dana Delga and Chris Fabricant, attorneys from the Innocence Project's Strategic Litigation Department, arrived at the La Plata County Court in Durango. Their goal was to challenge Corcoran's technique and persuade Judge Jeffrey Wilson not to admit the dog sniff evidence. Now, Chris Fabricant was hired by the Innocence Project in 2012 and has assembled a portfolio of questionable forensic techniques. By the time of Mark Redwine's trial, dog sniff evidence was high on that list. For one thing, dogs were prone to error. In data from Australia, police recorded 10,211 alerts made by drug sniffing dogs. 74% of the hits turned out to be false alarms. But Fabricant was especially concerned about instances where canines provided direct evidence. In one case, a Michigan man named Dondre Lane told police his daughter had been kidnapped during a carjacking. I think this is one of the cases that is featured on the Innocence file. And I think the dog that they got to do the sniffing came across especially from England. Is anybody else of the same opinion? But after an expert claimed his dog detected the odor of decomposing remains in Lane's car, a jury found him guilty of murder. In another, an Arizona woman was sentenced to life in prison for murdering her daughter and throwing the body in the trash. Prosecutors called two handlers who claimed their dogs detected the scent of death in a dumpster. A body was never found in either case, but the testimony helped seal the suspect's fate. Those cases suggested a larger pattern. A dog helped turn the loose threads in the prosecution's case into solid narrative rope. Good boy, quiet. Good boy, good boy. The cadaver dog is bridging the gap between pretty plausible suspect and guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, Delga says, emphasizing that she could not comment on any particular case. Follow the evidence. Molly, a dog trained to find cadavers, stopped at multiple locations near Mark Redwine's cabin in Colorado, supposedly after detecting the odor of human remains. No remains were found at any of the locations, and the GPS coordinates do not appear to match where the investigators previously collected physical evidence. Okay, so you've got the evidence and the dog stops, presumed paths of dogs and handler, day 1, day 2. Right clavicle and earbuds, right and left toe, hair clump, left shoe, femur, shirt piece. So the dog stopped at all these places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That one is a bit closer. Evidence there. Left shoe femur, but the dog stopped 1, 2, 1, 2, 4. What happened in trials without any testimony about dogs was also telling. In late 2019, Fabricant and Delga helped a Wisconsin attorney represent a man accused of killing his ex-girlfriend and dumping her body in a lake. Corcoran and a colleague claimed dogs detected the odor of human remains inside the suspect's home, but the defense convinced a judge that the testimony did not meet the legal standard for scientific evidence. The suspect was found not guilty, ending Corcoran's winning streak. No comprehensive database exists, but according to the National Registry of Exonerations, a project hosted by the University of Michigan Law School, at least 17 innocent people have been freed after dog sniff evidence erroneously sent them to prison. Other convictions have been upheld, even after errors came to light. In 2000, Anderson, who trained Corcoran at CSI, helped persuade a jury in Madison to convict a Tanzanian immigrant accused of murdering his cousin. In court, Anderson paraded her Doberman Pinscher in front of a jury, claiming the dog sniffed blood inside the suspect's home. Even though Anderson was later jailed for faking evidence, a judge upheld the life sentence, saying the discredited handler's testimony was, quote, harmless. Dear, oh dear. In a letter from prison, Peter Kupatsa, the man convicted of the murder, told Science he did not commit this crime and that he is 100% innocent. Did not commit the crime and that this is 100% fact. By 2019, when Fabricant and Delga submitted motions in Colorado, they had honed their argument. The Innocence Project attorneys did not question whether dogs could detect odors imperceptible to humans. Rather, they argued, what is at issue is what has never been proven with any degree of scientific reliability, and that is the ability of a dog to detect the residual scent of a particular object, including human remains, at a specific location days, weeks, months, or even more than a year after that object was removed. A sniff could be used to corroborate, but they argued a dog's indications alone should not be used to prove a person's guilt. Fabricant and Delga argued that a dog's behavior may reflect a handler's expectations, pointing to a 2001 study in animal cognition by Lisa Litt, then at UC Davis. Litt found handlers cued dogs into making false indications. In one test, Litt showed up each morning with evidence bags containing cannabis and gunpowder, explaining to 18 teams that those target scents might be present inside a church. No target odors were present, and yet the dogs positively indicated 85% of the time, handlers said, suggesting the dogs served as loyal companions first and objective scent detectives second. They certainly are loyal companions, but yeah, you wouldn't want to be convicted on or have a conviction confirmed on a, for that dog sniff to be the key bit of evidence, in inverted commas, that sends somebody away to prison. Similar issues came to light more recently in letters criticizing a 2018 study published in Forensic Science International. The experiment was designed to test the long-standing belief that dogs could man-trail unfamiliar suspects by their odor. In the study, dogs correctly trailed people 82% of the time, but early this year, several critics pointed out methodological shortcomings stemming from handler and experimenter bias, and the journal's editors added a cautionary expression of concern. Such biases may be impossible for dog handlers to avoid. Delga and Fabricant argued in their motion to exclude handler testimony in the red wine case. A dog is a companion animal with a vested interest in pleasing its master, they argued. Moreover, dogs are astute students of deliberate human signals and unintentional cues, paying close attention to people's faces, particularly our eyes. Good looking hand there, eh? The number of police dogs in the United States grew from 2,000 in 1989 to as many as 50,000 in 2010. Corcoran, who went by Karen Corcoran Gummin during the red wine trial, stands by her work. In an interview with Science, she compared her critics to flat earthers, saying she had, quote, spent the last 20 years being criticized by people who do not understand how cadaver dogs work. She saw her work as one tool to extract information where there otherwise was nothing. There's so many missing people that need to be found. You know, it's just sad. And that's really what it's all about. If we can recover somebody so their family can know the ending, that's really what it should be about. At the pre-trial hearing in Durango, Delga, who took the lead in cross-examining Corcoran, asked whether dogs could reliably indicate in areas where no remains turned up. She asked the handler, so there might be odor and you haven't recovered remains. Correct, Corcoran said. But you might also have a false positive. That's absolutely positive or possible, Corcoran said. Delga asked Corcoran whether Molly's indications on Redwine's property could be independently confirmed. There's no test other than the dog that can tell us whether odors are there. The testing that we conduct is simply, is there odor there or not, Corcoran said. Molly indicated, she said, which put the odor of a dead body at some point in time in contact with the suspect's property. Wilson allowed the testimony, citing an earlier ruling in Colorado that found that although dog tracking was not scientific, the criminal legal system accepted the technique as common knowledge. The judge also noted that Corcoran would be a star prosecution witness. On the 6th July, the 11th day of Redwine's trial, the prosecution called Corcoran to the stand. She described how Molly made more than 40 trained final indications, sitting near Redwine's clothes in Area 51, in and around the defendant's house, and in 12 places near where bones were found. That all suggested, as Corcoran told jurors, she detected the odor of human remains. Redwine's defense team raised the lack of a scientific basis for dog sniff evidence and the possibility that dogs reflect explicit prejudices, implicit biases, or simply the very human desire to fill in gaps in our perception. But research suggests many jurors simply don't see it that way. In 2019, Litt teamed up with Itiel Draw, a cognitive neuroscientist from London who studies expert decision making. They asked 554 mock jurors to read a story about a dog detecting the odor of drugs on a suspect's car, even though a later search turned up cash but no evidence of illegal activity. Litt says the scenario was meant to sound preposterous. Nonetheless, 2/3 of jurors surveyed said that they would have found the suspect guilty. The cadaver dog is bridging the gap between pretty plausible suspect and guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. None of the three major accrediting organizations that certify cadaver dogs tests their ability to detect residual odor, and little published research shows dogs are capable of the feat. I don't even know how you would even attempt to do that, says one of Corcoran's mentors, an official at an accrediting organization. Draw, by contrast, says a rigorous experiment would not be hard. It's not rocket science. It's very simple. He suggests putting out cadavers for 1 week, removing the remains, and then asking handlers who know nothing about the experimental setup to conduct a search. Still, Draw says he understands why people put their faith in untested claims. People want justice. Humans seek cognitive closure. You sleep better at night. The detectives and the juror do. If they find who did it and do not leave an unsolved crime, Draw told Science, here the dog comes and tells them. In the days before Corcoran's testimony, the evidence that Redwine murdered his son remained overwhelmingly circumstantial. The prosecution called Dylan's girlfriend, who tearfully remembered him saying he did not want to visit his father. Dylan's older brother hinted at a possible motive, saying Dylan was going to confront his father about photos allegedly showing Redwine eating what appeared to be feces out of a diaper. As a New York Post headline put it, compromising fetish pics led Colorado dad to kill teen son, prosecutors claim. The boy's skull contained apparent fractures, and though the possibility that cattle or scavenging wildlife damaged the bones after the death was hard to rule out, the prosecution called on an expert who said a sharp object was responsible. No weapon was ever found. The only direct evidence putting a dead body inside the suspect's home and his pickup came from Corcoran's testimony. She had trouble remembering details from a search 8 years earlier, and she broke down in tears when prosecutors displayed a photo of Molly, who died in 2018, on a screen behind the stand. None of the GPS coordinates Corcoran recorded on the mountain matched the location of any skeletal remains. But that did not necessarily prove Molly wrong, she said, because odor could potentially travel down the mountain in streams and rivers. As the trial wound down, the defense called another expert, James Hart, a researcher at the University of Washington, Seattle, who studies applied animal behavior, but, as prosecutors got him to admit, has little first-hand experience with cadaver dogs. Hart questioned whether odors could linger for more than 48 hours because they are volatile and likely to dissipate. Given the lack of published research and the difficulty in ruling out false positives, he said, scientists generally did not accept residual odor as a valid concept. Hart argued that without tangible evidence to validate an indication, the dog alone could not yield any information. We don't know how to get inside the dog's mind, Hart told the jury. They are not machines. Redwine chose not to testify. 6 months after his son's disappearance, he wrote in a statement to local media, "I absolutely do not know where Dylan is." His attorneys tried to paint him as a loving father who must have felt guilty for losing his son on his watch. In a case built on circumstantial evidence, the trial pitted his claims of innocence against the dog's telling indications. 12 people were asked to decide whose story to believe. In late July, after more than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Redwine guilty, an outcome that cemented Corcoran's reputation for convincing jurors that dogs just know what the rest of us could not. Quite a lengthy read, that one, so I will leave that one in the description as usual. It is surely that the bottom line is, we talk about with a certain degree of scientific certainty, which is completely bogus, but then, we talk about beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know what to make of Mr. Redwine. It's still troubling, isn't it, that the system is happy to go with these experts that have set up this sort of cottage industry for themselves. Let me know what you think, and we'll hopefully see Pete and some other guests tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.